Hello everyone, Charles Watts here. Welcome back to Inside Arsenal, where once again I'm joined by James Benge of CBS Sports, which means it's time for Inside Arsenal Extra Time. Good to see you again, mate. How are you getting on?
I'm really well. The summer is here. Our brief lull. We have all of 10 days until Euros kick off. Enjoy it while it lasts, this peace and quiet.
Are you getting excited yet? Have you got Euros fever?
I don't know. No. It's like a ticking time bomb, isn't it? I mean, when you work in this industry professionally, everyone complains, don't they? And all the players rightly complain about the amount of football they're asked to play. We have to follow them around, or we have to watch it all. It's exhausting. Like, just imagine if someone just said, like, guys, we're just going to do no football for 6 weeks, no training, no transferring, no nothing for 6 weeks. Oh, be in heaven.
I don't know. I think that'd last about 2 weeks, and then I'd start getting bored. Yeah. My kids, I tell you what, again, Euros fever. Look, here is my daughter. Drew Switzerland. They both got half-term projects, and they drew groups out, and then they had to do a sort of project on the country of interesting facts and stuff.
Did she mention Granit Xhaka?
My daughter, which I helped her out, and she got Switzerland, so we got a picture of Granit Xhaka down there somewhere that I've stuck on. My son got Spain, and they've both got to track their teams throughout the tournament. So yeah, they're.
So your son will be working a lot longer than your daughter.
I don't know. You see, I was saying this. Yeah. Amy was getting upset yesterday because Luke was going, "My team's better than yours. They're going to beat you." And I was like, I wouldn't be surprised if Switzerland put off actually do pretty well in this tournament. To be fair, the way Granit's playing at the moment, it'll lead him. His Ballon d'Or, his hunt for the Ballon d'Or continues with leading Switzerland to the final. You were at the Champions League final, of course, at the weekend. What was that? What was that like?
Oh, mate, it was absolutely brilliant. I mean, you know what Wembley's like for a big final. But imagine sort of fan bases that aren't kind of sick and tired of making the journey down, like Man City or like Man United, like people that are sort of genuinely in awe of being there. Atmosphere was incredible. Mm-hmm. Big names of football history, wherever you look. Mourinho to your left, Sir Alex to your right. And the game as well. I mean, we spoke about it last week, and we're both like, Madrid will win this quite comfortably. And I mean, at least there was drama and excitement. Brilliant occasion. And definitely one of those like pinch yourself moments where you see those flares lit in the Dortmund end and all that, and you realize you're at the Champions League final.
Was that your first Champions League final?
Second. But my first one was in Paris, and I got tear gassed, so I don't have great memories of that one.
Which one was that?
I was not that Paris one. That was Paris, Liverpool, Real Madrid.
Where
I kind of remember. I missed about, even though kickoff was delayed, I missed about 25 minutes.
Really?
While I sort of chased French riot police around. So it was sort of the first post-COVID final, you remember, and I think I had a holiday coming up, or a festival, so I was really anxious about getting COVID. And I'd been outside the ground for sort of 10-15 minutes, and I just started coughing, spluttering, crying, and immediately it was like, oh my God, I've got COVID. Hannah's going to kill me. I'm coming back with COVID. Can't go to Primavera. And then you sort of see the French riot police lobbing tear gas, and you're like, oh, no, it's fine. I've just been tear gassed.
Yeah, I got tear gassed in Paris at a final. Not for that. It was 1994. No, 1995, Zaragoza. When they decided
to keep then.
I was a kid, yeah. Got tear gas still. They decided to keep us all in, even though I think they planned, obviously, for sort of what they were going to do at the end of the game, and they'd obviously planned, I think, for Arsenal winning the final, and so they were going to let the Zaragoza fans out first. But Zaragoza won it, and because I think they'd planned to let Arsenal out first, they then kept all the fans in the stadium instead of just letting Arsenal out second. So yeah, instead of just letting Arsenal out the full-time whistle, they kept us all in, and everyone obviously got more and more pissed off trying to get out. And then tear gas. It's just wasn't a fun experience. But
thank God they're hosting no major sporting events this summer.
Yeah, very true. Let's see how that goes. Had bad experiences in Paris. I was there for 2006 as well. Didn't get tear gas that time, but it was still bloody horrible.
Quite a low bar as well, isn't it?
Yeah. I thought it was a decent game on Saturday. Dortmund, fair play to them. I mean, it was Madrid just did a Madrid, didn't they? They absolutely did a Madrid. I thought the second half they were actually better. You wouldn't have heard the commentary because you were there. I was watching it, and I thought they were going a bit over the top in the second half, like acting like Dortmund was still well on top. And I was watching that second half, and I thought Madrid are going to score here. The more I thought they'd grown into the game. Dortmund had one chance to header, didn't they, in that second half?
The full
nothing like we'd seen in the first half, and it felt inevitable to me that the Madrid were going to score. I don't think I'd have picked Carvajal to be the guy to break the deadlock, but yeah, I mean, unbelievable what they do.
Just one final thought on that from like a Madrid perspective as well. What I found so remarkable was, I mean, I think you're right, but I got the sense it was more like an even game that Madrid was sort of getting a foothold in the second half. But the minute Madrid score, Dortmund's reaction, and you see it with so many teams, Dortmund's reaction is just like, oh no, they've done the Madrid thing, and they just gave up, and like not in a like lazy way, just in a like their year again, isn't it, sort of way. It's amazing what that aura does to teams.
It is, absolutely, yeah. They changed so much on that goal, and it was dominant after that. Not been a bad few days for Madrid, actually, is it? Win the Champions League, go and sign Kylian Mbappe on a free a couple of days later. Not too bad, is it? They'll be there or thereabouts again next season. I would I would predict.
How on
right? We're going to go on.
Beat them if we're in. Sorry, mate, face them. How on earth do you beat them if you end up drawing against them in the group stages or whatever?
You've got to add Endrick into the mix as well. It's not just Mbappe, it's Endrick as well. So, scary stuff. Scary stuff. We are going to focus today's show on sort of our Arsenal dream windows. It comes from a question that was sent in a few weeks ago that I flagged at the time. I thought we haven't got time to talk about this now, but we're actually going to do a show about it because I thought it'd make a really interesting show. Before we get on to that, though, just quickly on a few sort of bits and pieces that have been doing around since the last time we spoke when it comes to Arsenal. Did you see the sort of retained list type thing that Arsenal put out yesterday? All clubs do. The 22 players who have gone, contract offers or discussions ongoing for Kozia Dubry, Hine, and Walters. Walters, basically done his big goodbye post a couple of weeks ago, didn't he? Which is interesting. But yeah, any sort of surprises? Anything you sort of caught your eye looking at that?
I mean, there's two things. I mean, three, I guess. Like you say, with Walters, you were just like, I thought you were gone, mate. But you suspect that's maybe more about finding him alone and sort of Arsenal retaining some asset value, but it seems quite unlikely.
I think quickly on that, I think also you have to show, don't you, as a sort of the club that the player's leaving, you have to show you've made a good effort to keep him for when you get your compensation when they leave at his age on a free. So I don't know if it might be something to do with that as well.
Which I do wonder if it might be the case with Kozia Dubry. I think there is a real desire to keep hold of him. I know that for a fact, but it's just very hard to keep a bright young talent whose maybe best spot is on the right wing when you've got Bukayo Saka, isn't it? And you sort of look down that list and all the people that there was real excitement about a few years ago. And the Romanian kid, Sirjan, I think that's how you pronounce it. Keto Taylor Hart as well. I think in a different era, they would be staying around longer, and maybe some of them would get minutes, and maybe some of them would get the real chance to break through, and that's all they need. Sometimes all you need is a chance, but I think even if you're someone of Kozia Dubry's talent, it's just hard to see where those opportunities come. So it doesn't surprise me that Arsenal, for all their rich track record of youth development, for all the appeals of playing for Arsenal for a young guy, doesn't surprise me that they find it hard to keep hold of someone like him.
Yeah, it's hard to keep hold of all of them. Obviously, tied Lewis Skelly and Nwaneri down to contracts in the last sort of year or so, but to keep all of them is really hard, like you said, especially when there's so much being offered to them from rival clubs as well, and sort of trying to map out a pathway. And it is difficult. Yeah, there was nothing that really surprised me on the players who went. Obviously, we knew about most of them. Benjamin Sesko, consistently in the news when it comes to Arsenal at the moment. Player we know that they're looking at. Have you seen today? Surprise, surprise. Who has been linked with him as well?
Is it Chelsea Football Club?
How on earth did you get that? I'm stunned that you managed to pluck that one out of the air from somewhere, mate.
It's like it's the Mr. Bean meme, isn't it? Of them just sort of like peering over at Edu's homework, being like,
well, they did it to Newcastle for tossing, didn't they? This week. He's the first one of the summer that they've hijacked, and I'm sure he's probably not going to be the last.
the financial machinations that you have to do to basically sell a good young centre back in Trevor Chalobah to get maybe one that's on the same level on a free, so that you can sort of tidy up your books. It doesn't seem a super effective way to build a team and build a squad. And of course, like, there's no surprise that if Chelsea are interested in Sesko, because he ticks every box they have, you know, young, available for a reasonable fee, you know, 65 million euro release clauses. I think we mentioned a few weeks back. That's what we think it's at. And it's Chelsea. They're just incapable of not spending, even when you kind of look at their financial position. There's no way they should be dropping 65 million on a player. And if they are, you know, they're in this brilliant bind where they both have a project and they've hired this project manager in Maresca and given him a 6-year contract. But that project necessitates them getting back into the Champions League next season because their finances are a complete mess. And when you look at the state of their squad, 4th is a good finish for them. 4th is probably the upper limits of what they could achieve. And as I say all this, I just think, what beyond a shed load of money could they offer to convince Sesko that that's the move? I mean, I was speaking to the chief executive of Shakhtar last week, and it came up as it always does. Why did Mikhailo Mudryk sign for Chelsea? Because Chelsea offered a shed load of money. Like, you know, the terms on the deal and all that was so much more favourable from Chelsea than they were for Arsenal. So Shakhtar were like, we've got 40 million of debt. We've got no way of transfer debt. We've got no real easy way of getting this money in. We've got to do the Chelsea deal. So Chelsea might do that for someone like Sesko as well. That's me speculating, but you know, that's all they've got to offer right now, as opposed to Arsenal or any. I mean, if City come in,
if you're a Sesko or any player at the moment, and you're looking at clubs to join to make. I think when you're sort of his age as well, and you're sort of looking to make that jump, you'd be so wary about going to a club like Chelsea, wouldn't you? So wary. Whereas you'd look at Arsenal, you'd look at how settled they are, you look at the project that they have and how sort of strategically planned it is. And if you're saying, where do I make the next step where I'm going to have so much of a better chance of making it and progressing and developing, I mean, you would choose Arsenal every single day of the week over Chelsea right now, wouldn't you? Every day of the week.
In a heartbeat. The only other thing I could see is that there's really good players at Arsenal and there aren't as many at Chelsea. And you might rather be like, you might fancy your chances of taking Nico Jackson's shirt rather than Kai Havertz's, but top level footballers, top level young talents don't and shouldn't think like that. So, like you say, if you're looking at this in terms of your career, in the knowledge that the money would come anyway, you pick Arsenal 100 times out of 100.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're below to Arsenal, should he suddenly choose there and go there? You know, they put a lot of work into Sesko. Obviously, we know behind the scenes, nothing done yet, nothing seemingly close to being done yet when it comes to him. But it'd be interesting to see if he did end up going to Chelsea, which I don't think will happen. But if he did, where Arsenal would sort of move on to when it comes to their striking thing. We'll talk about all this sort of stuff anyway in what the sort of main focus in the show that we're going to do. And it's going to be based here on a question that was sent in a couple of weeks ago from Aurora Freak. I did flag it at the time. And it was, so he says, hi, Charles and Mr. Bengino. There you go. Not just Benge like last week, Bengino.
Little Benge.
And it's about planning your perfect summer for Arsenal. It has to be realistic. He wants to see who would sell, who would let go. Can't really do the let go one now because they've already let go 22 players, and it's not really anyone else to. I presume when you say let go, that means on a free rather than sell. So that's already been taken care of. Who would you send out on loan? Who would you buy? Who would receive a new contract? He says, like I said, it has to be realistic. Have a nice weekend and greeting from Switzerland. From Switzerland, Aurora Freak. There you go. I'll get you included in my daughter's project. Yeah, so I thought it'd been an interesting sort of time to sit down and sort of discuss this, the sort of plans for the summer, what in our heads, what we think would be a good deal for Arsenal, good summer for Arsenal. And we did it a while ago, didn't we? We spoke about being Edu for the day, and this gives us another opportunity to do something like that. It has to be a realistic though, so we can't just go signing 3 £100 million players. So it's got to be realistic. So I've actually prepared myself pretty well. I've written stuff down here, James. I've written stuff down. So yeah, I bet you I'm more prepared for you than you for this.
Infinitely.
There you go. So we're going to start at the top there. Who would you sell? Now, this is a list that I've put down for who I would sell this summer. I've gone ESR, Ramsdale, Eddie, Zinchenko, Tierney, Sambi, Beerith, and Nuno Tavares as players that I would sell.
I would do all of them except Zinchenko.
Yeah, see, Zinchenko was one I was going to talk about. I think it's an interesting one. Zinchenko, I've put a question mark next to. So it's basically on the proviso that a good offer comes in. I wouldn't be actively. Oh, actually, I would. No, I'm going to stop there. I'll talk about him in a minute. Yeah, I would sell Zinchenko if a really good offer came in for him. I wouldn't be pushing him out the door. I still think he's got a big part to play if he stays around next season. And I think some of the criticism he's had is unfair. But I think looking at the makeup of the squad and with the return of Yuri and Timber, I think if a good bid comes in for Zinchenko, and I'm talking probably what did Arsenal pay for him? 35?
35.
Probably
So
around that figure. I would sell maybe 30 million. I would consider selling him. So is there anyone that I haven't listed there that you would think about selling?
Mention Reece Nelson?
I didn't mention Reece. I think I would keep Reece. If I'm selling ESR, Ramsdale, and Eddie, I'm just thinking for homegrown quota type things. For all four of those in the same window, I'm not sure. And also, I'm still not convinced that Arsenal are going to sign a right-sided backup for Bukayo Saka. So I think I would probably keep Reece. I think.
I think there's a challenge there. The homegrown thing is really important. It's worth considering. Of course, you have guys like Saliba and Martinelli that are homegrown, which is a positive, but you don't want to be sort of taking all those guys out. And yet, how on earth you convince Reece Nelson that he kind of wants to? I know you can just sort of sit down like Edu did with Smith Rowe last summer when he was perfectly willing to go and sort of say, "Tough, you're staying." Is the value really there if you're going to get like 300 minutes in the Premier League from him and you're paying him 100 grand a week? I appreciate the challenge might be that like no one comes in for for Nelson at that price and doesn't offer you a compelling deal, but I think I would let Reece Nelson go.
So would you let all four of those go in the same window? ESR, Ramsdale, Eddie, and
yeah,
Reece?
because I don't think there's any value in having anyone in the squad as long as you can make the homegrown maths rule work.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's any value having anyone in the squad on a sizable salary that is not, giving that Mikel Arteta isn't really going to pick unless he's absolutely desperate.
I think if you sell those four, and the fact that James Hilson's gone as well, I think Arsenal need to sign at least two players homegrown status. I think they have to looking at their list.
You just get the homegrown status from your sort of backup goalkeeper, don't you?
But Arsenal don't have a backup goalkeeper. And Carl Hines won. Carl Hines won. So you would basically have to sign one of your goalkeeper, who we'll get to when I'm talking about potential buying, would I think the backup goalkeeper would need to be some sort of homegrown status, I think. And obviously you can sign another player. One of your outfield players can be homegrown, and it might well be. We know that Arsenal have liked to move in the Premier League market. So, but I think homegrown, it definitely comes into the equation when it comes to selling and buying this summer. It does, especially with the fact that the four potential big departures could well all be homegrown players for Arsenal. Interesting. Yeah. We spoke about this before. ESR, Ramsdale, Eddie, and Reece. Combined transfer fee for those four.
So for me, like in terms of when the level where I'd say yes, 20 for Eddie, 25 for Ramsdale, 20 for ESR. On the basis that then like you say, I'm factoring in homegrown, I'd want to push Reece Nelson up towards 10. So 20, 40, 50, 75 million for the four. Not bad money, is it?
No, not terrible. I think I'd want more than that, though, I have to say. We'll talk about Eddie a little bit. Actually, some of the questions. I spoke about Eddie this morning, and his transfer fee. That's interesting. It's going to be a lot of business for just these players that we're talking about. This is just purely for selling when it comes to Eddie. I mean, he's going to be a busy man this summer when it comes to moving some of these players on. And it'll be interesting to see what happens with Tierney and Sambi as well, because one of the questions we've also got afterwards into that, who would you send out on loan? Some of these players, I think it's probably unrealistic to think Arsenal sell all of these players that I've listed in one window. So some of them might end up having to go out on loan when it gets towards the end of the window. If someone, potentially Tierney again, is there going to be a market for Tierney? Can Arsenal sell? They'll want to, just like they did last summer. Couldn't sell last summer, so had to send them out on loan. Will they have to do that again? So I've got, in terms of the younger players, I think Lewis Skelly would be good to go out on loan next season. No point. I just don't see the point in hanging around. I don't see him pushing on to the first team picture next season. So I think a good loan for him. Try and do a sort of Amari Hutchinson type loan. I've got a question mark next to Nwaneri because I don't actually think he goes. I think he stays and comes into the first team. I think that's definitely the next step for him, especially if ESR goes and players like that. There's a position there in the squad for him to get the sort of minutes that other players complain about, but for him would be really valuable minutes at his age. So, yeah.
On the loan thing, can I change my mind on who I'd sell? And I'll explain why. I'm going to make a calculated gamble and keep Smith Rowe, because I don't think that this is all subject to like someone not sort of making a Godfather offer for Smith Rowe, which I can't see coming along. If you look at the clubs that are being linked and that have got an interest. So I would keep Smith Rowe and send Fabio Vieira out on loan back to Porto. Ideally, would be like the dream deal. If I could make that happen, I feel like the improvements I'll get from Fabio Vieira would offset the fact that I'm going to get even less money for Smith Rowe in the likely event that I then sell him when he's got 12 months left on his contract.
My only thing with that, I would say, is Vieira I see far more as a right-sided 8, and I see ESR far more as a left-sided 8. And I look at the sort of potential players to come in and lessen the load on Martin Odegaard throughout next season, and there's no real standout players in that squad. So it would worry me a little bit to send Vieira out, because I see him as potentially someone who can come in and give Martin Odegaard a bit of a break. And I'm not sure I don't really see Mikel playing Emil there. I don't know about you.
That would be the worry. But there's always this balance, isn't there, when you're sort of putting yourself in Edu's shoes, which I guess we are, of you have to give Arteta the squad he wants. You have to give, make sure he doesn't have players he doesn't intend to use at all. But I do always think there should be a little bit of sort of poking and prodding, and a good director of football should sort of also have a level where he sort of goes, I've got to think about the long-term development of this squad more than you are going to be thinking about the next 3 points. So if the only person you've got to cover Odegaard at right 8 is Smith Rowe and Nwaneri, you're just going to have to cope with that, Chief. That's not necessarily ideal team building, but the point of all this is, unless you're Man City, unless you're PSG, you have to make compromises somewhere. And I think in the end, Fabio Vieira, if he doesn't start playing a lot of football soon, you're just going to end up with a complete busted flush. That's a harsh way of putting it. It just will feel like you've not developed him into the player he could have been based on the price tag you paid. So
it was quite telling, his lack of minutes in the second half of the season when he came back to, he just did not feature at all. Emil was coming on ahead of him in the times when Mikel did make some changes. It was weird, wasn't it? Vieira totally out of the equation when he came back from injury. He only barely got any minutes in the last 3 months, didn't he? At all, which was quite telling. Well, what are you expecting from Nwaneri next season? And what sort of minutes do you think he could make? What sort of 10, 15 appearances in all competitions? Maybe a couple of starts in there in the Carabao Cup, something like that. About 500 odd minutes, something like that.
Yeah, largely dead rubber minutes in the Premier League, but good minutes in the cups. I don't fully understand how the Champions League will work in practice, so we'll park that one for now. But actual real meaningful starts in the cups, and always on the bench, always.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. So kind of what we saw against West Ham, that times about sort of 8 or 9 throughout the season in the league, maybe something
Ideally
like that.
times 38, mate.
Yeah.
Ideally, all the games are won at the 70th minute, and in comes Nwaneri.
That would be nice. That would be nice.
Get him on at Anfield when you're 3-0 up.
There you go. Right, this is a fun one. Who would you buy? And again, we've got to be realistic here. So this is what I've got for my buy-in now. I've gone to the Cronkies, got my begging bowl out. I've gone to the Cronkies, and this is what I'm coming back with. So I've gone Benjamin Sesko up front. Obviously, that would be Alexander Isak if we weren't being realistic here. But I don't see any world where Arsenal are able to sign Alexander Isak this summer. So I've gone him. This is probably unrealistic, but I've gone Bruno. I've kind of jumped to the dark side with Bruno in the last month or so. And I actually really like the idea of signing Bruno Guimaraes now. I really do. So I've got him. I've gone Michael Elise
Yes!
as well. And then I've gone Fabianski as
he's homegrown, isn't he?
Yeah, as my backup goalkeeping option. And obviously David Raya made permanent, which is obviously a given. But so there's 5. Whether that's realistic, 5, I don't know. I mean, 2 of them are goalkeepers. So, and one of them's Raya, who, is already signed. But yeah, so I'm not signing a defender. I'm not going for a defender. I think Arsenal got enough for defence. I've gone Sesko, Bruno, Elise, and Fabianski as my major summer arrivals. There you go. What about you?
Sesko, Bruno. I mean, I love 3 of them. I don't know that the value's there. I really struggle with a sort of realistic, because when you constrain yourself in that way and you're Arsenal, so it also has to be at the level you're at, someone that meaningfully pushes your team on. It's really hard to find those guys in the market. But I don't know that Bruno is the absolute one. 25. No, I'm not. I'm going to be very annoying and just be like, no, but not come up with a concrete alternative to Bruno Guimaraes. I'm trying to think.
Zubimendi's a name that continues to be linked, isn't it? But I haven't seen enough of Zubimendi to really know if he's if he moves the needle that much when he comes in. I mean, if they signed him, then I'd be very confident that he would, because I'm very confident in the transfer business that the club do now. But he's still being linked even today. I saw obviously James at Gunnerblog did a good piece in Athletic looking at Arsenal transfer stuff for the summer, and he still says that Arsenal are very interested in him, but there is still that belief that he might not want to leave Spain, might want to leave Sociedad. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, other midfield options are there? Was it Andre Nana, isn't it? He's always sort of linked with Arsenal, players like that.
I like that one.
Do you? So, yeah, you prefer that? You prefer that to Bruno this summer?
Price, yeah, because I think I can make the money all work a bit more convincingly.
I mean, Arsenal are in a decent position money-wise. They're making a lot of money in the last year.
Then I can't. Then if I buy Bruno, I'm stuck with Bruno forever for his career.
You think? How old is he? 25.
25. So he's not too old. I'm getting good. It's not necessarily the years that I'm worried about. It's that's it. It's Bruno Guimaraes and Declan Rice and Martin Odegaard. 2 of the last 2, great total building blocks. But this is the 3rd guy. If I picked up someone like an Onana, he could be the 4th guy long term. And you could just sort of wait the market out. You remember when Liverpool? I think maybe we will sort of look around and kind of conclude that Arsenal are in the same space that Liverpool were when they were after that centre back, and they just said, if we can't get Van Dijk, we don't want anyone that will get in the way. So a placeholder or a player that can sort of eventually drop down. I mean, Edu does have a depth chart, so down Edu's depth chart, like Onana, who you'd still be saying like, look, you'll get really good minutes at this club over the years ahead. But yeah, that's where I'm at. I would almost keep my powder dry, and I'm sure that would go down so well on Arsenal Twitter if Arsenal were just like, oh yeah, no, we don't fancy buying a midfielder this year. We'll wait.
You're putting a lot of faith in Thomas Partey's fitness.
Well, I'm going to get. That's why I'll get Onana. Say,
right.
Let's pick him at.
Do you think Arsenal have to sign a central midfielder this summer?
Not necessarily have to,
right?
But I would like to, because long term I have to replace Jorginho and Partey.
Yeah,
so
I think they need to sign a central. I think they have to sign a sort of someone to come in and be in the starting 11 in central midfield this summer. I would be worried going into next season with Partey and Jorginho as the sort of 2 6 as well. I mean, obviously Rice is there, and maybe he wants to bring Rice back and play Rice fully as 6 next season, and he puts all his money into signing another left 8 or something like that. I don't know, but if
that's the joy of my solution. Just wait, because the players aren't there.
If Rice is going to continue playing as left 8, if that's a long-term sort of outlook for Rice now, then I think they have to sign another 6, because I'm just not sure going into the season with basically Partey and Jorginho, with both of their ages and with Partey's fitness. I think that's a bit of a risk for me. So yeah,
I can play Onana at the 8, can't I? Or the 6.
You could.
It's
asking a lot for a young, inconsistent player. I like Onana. I do like Onana. I think but he's definitely an inconsistent player. And you speak to Everton fans about him, he'll be a world beater one week, and then he'll have 4 weeks where he's really frustratingly bad. And I'm not sure Arsenal in a position to have a player like that if they're going to compete with Manchester City. Okay, so new contracts I've listed down here. Big Gabby, which I think is a necessity this summer. I've gone Saliba and Saka. I think you've got to start now with those two. I think you really have to start now with both of them. They only signed 4-year deals, didn't they, at the time? I just think you've got to start with those two as quickly as possible. And try and get them done and reward them. I mean, Saliba's just an absolute monster, and I'm convinced that William Saliba will end up at Real Madrid at some point. He just got Real Madrid written all over him, especially this project that Real Madrid are building. I just don't want that to be anywhere near yet. I want at least 4 or 5 more years of Saliba at Arsenal before he eventually moves on. And so I think they need to be talking to both of those very, very quickly if they're not already doing it, which I don't think they are. But
beyond the only other one I had was Carl Hein. Get him signed up. Everyone I speak to at the club just says he's a lovely guy, and sometimes that's what you need from a third goalkeeper. But
does he want to be a third goalkeeper though? That's the thing. He's been a third goalkeeper. He needs to play, isn't he? He's an international. It's like if he signs up to be third choice again, I can see why there must be very little appeal for him to actually do that now, when he could probably go out, and I'm sure he's got clubs across Europe, offering him a first choice goalkeeper spot in one of their squads. Obviously not at a club like Arsenal, but somewhere where he can really start to kick on in his career now.
Yeah, but if he's willing to sign it, I'm not running a charity. I'll be offering him a contract.
Oh, I'd definitely be offering him. I'd solve a massive issue. If Arsenal could do that, it would solve an absolute massive issue there. It's a homegrown as well. So,
I wouldn't quite do the old put what you want on a piece of paper, because it's only Carl Hein. But as I really say this, like, you don't get to know much about someone's football when they're the third choice goalkeeper, but people see them around a lot. They're often in the match day squads, and I speak to people who just think he's just the nicest guy, a really good egg, good player around the training ground. So no harm with that. And then like you say, I want to get to the stage with at least one of Bukayo Saka and William Saliba where they are trapped in a Harry Kane-esque purgatory and they are always unable to escape. Should they ever want to. Hopefully they never want to, but if they do ever get sort of like wandering eye, you just want to be like, oh, I'm sorry, Bukayo, you signed a 6-year contract 18 months ago. You're stuck, mate. I'd give them lifetime deals if they want it.
Absolutely throw money at them all. So there you go, Aurora Freak. We've gone through it now. We've done most of what we would do. We've pretty much sold half the squad. We've signed Sesko. Elite. Were you in agreement with Elise? Do you think that'd be a good signing? Would you be happy with Elise?
Yeah, I think so. The injuries worry me a bit, but yeah, let's go for it.
Yeah, so we've sold half the squad. Signed Sesko, Elise, Fabianski. Argued over Bruno. Couldn't agree. We've given Gabby a new contract and we're in talks with Saliba and Saka. There you go.
Need to get that done before the season's over.
There you go. Over to you, Edu. Easy as that. Do it. Okay, right. Let's move on to the second half of the show now. Although we're already at 35 minutes. Question times. Here we go. Okay, first up is one from, is that Loud Johnny? It says, extra time. Hi, Charles and James. Do you reckon Arsenal will sign a winger and a striker at the same time if Jesus stays? Budget is one restriction. Another is it will be having at least 7 players across the front three, new striker, new winger, Saka, Martinelli, Trossard, Havertz, Jesus, which seems more than necessary and could make players unhappy. Thanks for the updates and please keep up. So what about you? Do you think a winger and a striker could happen this summer?
Could. Yeah, and I see how he sort of laid all that out there, but you can carry a bit of extra depth in the front line. I mean, at the moment as well, like we've got new striker, new winger there. I could just swap in Nketiah and Nelson. So like it's the same squad volume in numbers. I mean, of course, the finances and that, you know, if I say swap in Nketiah and Nelson, that means, like we were just saying, Nketiah and Nelson would have to go. And I think if both of them didn't go, just from a purely practical point, it may be more difficult in terms of budget and squad. But yeah, I'm perfectly happy having 7.
Mm-hmm.
Although I would worry about giving them all enough minutes. But
yeah, I don't think I'd be surprised if a striker and a winger signed. It might well be well, actually, at the moment, it's obviously looking more and more like Sesko at the moment that they're going for. But and Sesko can't really play out wide. So I was saying you could get a combination of both, but I just think it might be a little bit too much business if you do that as well, and you're signing a midfielder and you're signing a couple of goalkeepers.
Yeah,
I think there's definitely a place for it if the budget can stretch that much. But if you're sort of saying what are the chances, I say far more likely that they just sign one than the 2.
agreed.
Okay, a couple here. This is on Eddie now. This is what you've already kind of. What did you? But I wrote it down here. You said 20 million for Eddie. See, I spoke about it today, and I said 30 million. I think it's a good price for Eddie because have you seen the reports linking him with Fulham and saying Fulham are willing to pay?
Everyone's being linked with Fulham, aren't they?
Yeah, I know Smith Rowe and Eddie both headed to Fulham. And it was 30 million. And I was thinking about this, and I explained it on my show today why I think 30 million is actually a good price tag for Eddie. I think he's a proven Premier League goal scorer. I think he's a really good age now. I think he's shown he can do it in the Premier League. The fact that he's now Arsenal have outgrown him, I don't think is any slight against Eddie. I just think Arsenal are now at such a high standard that you have to be a top player to sort of come in and make and just show that you're good enough to play in this team now. And I'm not sure Eddie is quite there, but I think he's definitely proven that he's a quality Premier League player who will score goals given the chances in the Premier League. He's got a decent contract still. Time left on his contract still. Like I said, he's young, he's homegrown. I think you marry that all together. I think you've got a £30 million player on your books there. I just feel like 20 million. I mean, Amari Hutchinson had a good season at loan for Ipswich, and there's talk that Chelsea are going to get about £25 million for him this summer. So in what world is Eddie Nketiah not worth as much as Amari Hutchinson, given what Eddie's done in the Premier League over the last few years?
Arsenal need to sell him or are looking to sell him.
Do they need to sell him?
And I don't need to, but he wants to go.
Huh?
We assume if I'm looking at this from, I'm going to say, look at what Arsenal fan says as well about, Furious are paying 30 million plus. John, yeah. They don't serve any great value to Arsenal. Like the best return that Arsenal could get for Nketiah would not be him sort of sitting on the bench for another year, scoring, 6 goals in the Premier League. Arsenal, his greatest use to Arsenal now is financial. Mm-hmm. So if I'm the buying club, I can sort of look at that and say, well, I'm not going to get fleeced here. Arsenal want the money so that they can invest it elsewhere in the squad more than they want to keep Nketiah around. They're not reluctant sellers, and I have sort of seen the indications going around that Arsenal would be reluctantly prepared to sanction a deal at 30 million. Like Arsenal wouldn't be reluctant to do any deal for it Nketiah once they get to a certain price level. So everyone and their father and their dog knows that Eddie's a bit more available than even Amari Hutchinson, and that's what it all comes down to. It's sort of, what do you think you can get away with paying for these players? I do agree about, he shows he scores goals pretty much whenever he plays. If you go minutes, it's a goal every other game. But he is playing for Arsenal. He's playing in a really good attack that creates chances for its centre forward. At Fulham, is he that player? Like, he's not going to create for himself. He's a great finisher, or he's very good at getting in a position to finish, which I really like in any striker.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not. I'm not getting much beyond a great finisher, am I? His passing's always needed work. He works hard off the ball, but the pressing, I don't think, ever comes to him instinctively. He can't carry, can't hold up. There's a lot of things I would sort of... This is me looking at it as sort of trying to argue down the price to Arsenal. That's why I think 20 million is probably a fair price to settle on. I wouldn't. I mean, there's no point going much below that. You're just not getting any bang for your buck. But yeah.
Well, I'm looking here now. See, I understand what you're saying there, but Conor Gallagher, if he goes this summer, how much is he going to go for?
Conor Gallagher's an England international. I know Eddie Nketiah's got caps for England.
He's got a year left in his contract. Everyone knows Chelsea are looking to sell him for PSR rules. So it's exactly the same situation. I mean, how much did Mason Mount go? 55 million last summer? Had a year left in his contract. Chelsea signed... I'm just looking around. I'm typing while you're talking. I'm psyching. Chelsea signed Nicholas Jackson for £32 million last summer. Wolves signed Matheus Cunha for £35 million last summer.
How many? So, I mean, that Wolves one is interesting because it was them really messing up their finances the previous January. So the Cunha was like a loan with obligation to buy. My other fear is just simply looking around the league. I think even after the Mitrovic deal, the sense I get is Fulham aren't great on the PSR front. You've got your Villas, Chelsea, Newcastle. How many teams have got real PSR headroom? Probably Palace, Brighton, Brentford, Spurs. Not that much used to Arsenal. So you don't have like this great volume of teams that are all going to be scrapping over Eddie Nketiah.
Weirdly, see, I think there'll be a big market for Eddie. I honestly think there'll be quite a lot of sniffing around Eddie. I'm not quite so sure on some of those like Reece. I can't really see a huge market for Reece. I think ESR there'll be quite a market for him. But I think Eddie would be quite an appealing option for a lot of clubs, just because he scores goals in the Premier League, and that is that every single club wants that. He's not going to go to United, he's not going to go to City, Liverpool, or something like that. But I think those mid-table clubs that we've listed, the likes of Fulham, Wolves, Brighton, Ipswich, who've just kind of clubs like that who are just looking for striker. I think Eddie would be a really appealing option. I honestly think 30 million. I'd be disappointed if Arsenal don't get 30 million for him. I wouldn't be surprised because it's Arsenal, but I do think 30 million is a fair price for Eddie. I think it's quite interesting. So these questions, obviously, it sort of shows a varying opinion on it. You got the top one there saying 40 million for Eddie, and then you got the bottom one saying, I often try to think about transfer sales values by thinking how I would feel if I was a buying team, and if I was a Fulham fan, I'd be furious for paying 30 million plus for either Eddie or ESR as well. So there's obviously a very difference in opinion from a lot of people in terms of price tags. But yeah, for me, I'm saying 30 million. It'd be interesting to see who's closer, because I do think Eddie goes. So I've gone 30 million, you've gone 20. We'll see who's closer.
It's gonna be 25, isn't it?
Come the end of the season, 25 slap bang in the middle. Right, Corey here asks, hi Charles and James, do you know if Arsenal have any clauses including any of the deals when youth players have left, i.e. Amari Hutchinson, Flo Balogun, Harry Clark, Dan Ballard? We were talking about this actually before you came on the show, weren't we? Because I'd seen something doing around, and I cannot at all confirm this or not. I just saw something doing around that I thought was quite interesting. As I was talking to James, it came up on my Twitter feed that the Amari Hutchinson potential deal that Chelsea are looking to do for 25 million, that Arsenal have got a 50% sell on that. Now, that seems really high to me. And I know that Arsenal have definitely got sell on. They've got sell on all these players. And basically, in answer to your question, Corey, they do have sell on clauses in a lot of these players. Arsenal have done that. Flo Balogun, 17.5%. That was a big deal that they cut with Monaco when they did that. 17.5% of future sales, or the next future sale. I'd be surprised if 50% is the right number for Amari, because I'm not sure I've ever really heard of a 50% sell-on clause, but 25% is a good sell-on, isn't it? 50 would be a really big one.
He got yes, and that seems huge. I think we were saying the highest we can remember is sort of 30-35%.
Yeah,
When
Zaha had
United
that
let
one
Zaha.
when he went from United to Palace. He had 25%, and that really stood. Like Palace didn't want to sell,
Yeah,
because they just knew they were going to have to hand 25%, a quarter of their sale over to Man United when losing their best player. And I think that stopped Zaha moving a lot of times.
Ballard's I know is chunky.
Yeah,
Is that the right word? Whatever it is though, it's a big chunk. And I've been quite sniffy about these, and I think that they're a calculated gamble, aren't they? Because Dom, you have players like Dom Thompson, when he was sort of on the fringes of the first team squad, went to Brentford for next to nothing at all. And the sort of emphasis was really, but we've got a good sell-on clause on this, good sell-on clause. Brentford, great development club, and he'll go on and achieve great things and we'll make money down the line. And he didn't, because they had Rico Henry. So it's a high-risk approach, but there's a few, I mean, all the sort of, I'm not too familiar with Harry Clark, but the other three guys that are named there, there's real prospects for it paying dividends. Ballard's been great for Sunderland. Maybe Balogun. I mean, the Balogun sale's looking more and more impressive by the game as well, by the way, because he cannot score a goal for Monaco. So at least with that one, you got some cash up front. They're proving me wrong a bit, because I wasn't particularly sold on this. I thought you should just get the money when you can get the money.
Yeah. And I know the Hutchinson one, I know they definitely got a good sell-on clause on it. I know that for fact. I just don't know the number. But
because they can
it
be quite
will be a
variable.
high one, because it's what Arsenal have been doing. They have given some of these young players away for relatively cheap. But like you said, it has been because they've thought, we're going to get a really good sell-on clause on them. Like the Dan Ballard one, like you said, is a prime example of that. And Amari was Chelsea did not spend much money to get Amari Hutchinson to Arsenal, from Arsenal, but there was definitely a decent sell-on clause. I'd be stunned if it's 50%. It'd be great if it was, but
what could be possible is, as these negotiations get more and more complicated. I'm not aware of this at Arsenal, but I'm aware of other clubs where the sell-on gets sort of staggered a bit. So you might get 50% of the first 2 million, or even in reverse order. But the numbers will trickle up or down, so that it sort of keeps the buying club with a bit more insurance. If he does go on to be a superstar like Hutchinson was for Chelsea. I know they're not the most competent and sensible of negotiators, but good God, it would be insane, wouldn't it, to say, help yourself to half the money we get from this guy when we do sell him.
Yeah, it'd be nice. I know Marcelo Flores is another example. They've definitely got a good sell-on clause on Marcelo Flores, who they let go back to Mexico. They've got matching rights on some of these deals as well. Dan Ballard, I think they've got one on Dan Ballard, where if a bid does come in, then Arsenal have the option to match it.
That's your homegrown defender.
Yeah, there you go. Bring it out. Well, Harry Clark's done brilliant at Ipswich. It's been an absolute sensation for them since he's gone back there as well. So yeah, thank you very much for your question, Corey. Here's one from Manish from Mumbai in just as Charles and James. While we go chasing after striking talent from Europe, would like to understand what prevents us from fast tracking folks like Chido, Obi, Martin, and Nwaneri. It's not like we are short on striking power. Jesus, Havertz, Trossard, or for that matter, support on the wings. Martinelli skilled enough to operate on both flanks. Surely Nwaneri or Chido look like they have what it takes. Did Barca take a glacial filter to promote in talent like Pedri, Gavi, and Yamal?
Chido Obi Martin is doing great things, and Arsenal are working hard to convince him to sign a new contract. Chido Obi Martin is not ready for the Arsenal first team. Chido Obi Martin is not a talent on the levels of Lamine Yamal and Pedri, and it's sort of bizarre to place him up. You kind of have to say the truth of this. There is a lot of things that like scouts and people I talk to who are around the youth team say is great about Chido Obi Martin, but the reason the numbers are so huge is that he's a mismatch for a lot of the defenders he comes up against.
Mm-hmm.
So, step back on that. As for Nwaneri, they are fast tracking him. He is the youngest Premier League debutant in history. Is he 17 yet?
Yeah, just turned 17.
Just turned 17, and he's got more than one Premier League game. He's regular around the squad. That is fast tracking. And, Mikel Arteta has seen this work quite well with Phil Foden as well. That there is no rush to do it. Yeah, I think people just sort of somewhat need to get out of the headspace of like the kid in the academy that scores 16 goals or the kid in the academy that scores one wonder goal that ends up on Twitter is the guaranteed future of this club. Like, I don't know with Chido Obi Martin because I don't watch all his games, but a lot of Arsenal fans don't either, nor do they watch all these other leagues. But that's a moan for another time, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying, and I look at I hope he progresses and continues to do what he's doing and progresses and gets into the first team in a couple of years, into the first team picture in a couple of years. But he's so young. You imagine throwing him into the first team now. You just know he's just nowhere near ready for it yet, and you just got to be careful with these sort of players as well. You do get the odd generational talent who just look ready straight away, and Barca are the players you point out there at Barca are prime examples of that. But for every, I see Chido Obi Martin, and I just think J. Emmanuel Thomas and players like that who, at their, especially when they're physically so much bigger than everyone else, which he is, and you're playing at that sort of level, it makes such a difference. It really does. And I'm not saying that's no slight against him as a player. I'm sure he's hugely, immensely talented. But yeah, if he was remotely near ready, he would be in and around it by now. They're not stupid. The coaching staff at Arsenal are not stupid. If you've got this absolutely unbelievable talent, he'd be very close to the first team now already. They see him and they hear from the coaches all the time. The fact he's not just suggests he's just not ready.
Barcelona signed Pedri when he was 18, 19, by the way, and he played a full season of second tier football. So he's a bit more like pick a young name from the Championship being signed for Arsenal, which I would love to see them doing more of.
Right. I think we've got two more here. So one from Dotty Dot says, "Hi, Charles and James. Do you think it's possible we could see a Ben White-esque situation with Saliba in the French squad? There have been reports over the last days that Deschamps is going to stick with Upamecano and Konate as his starting central defenders. I think Konate and Saliba would make fantastic partnership if they were given regular playing time together. But the fact that Upamecano is preferred over Saliba is genuinely mind-boggling to me, with potentially spending the Euros predominantly on the bench. In addition to Deschamps' past comments about not liking things Saliba does, how likely is it that Saliba could decide to withdraw until Deschamps leaves? I think very, very unlikely. I mean, I'm not overly surprised, to be honest, because the way Deschamps has sort of handled Saliba so recently, or since he's been on the scene, I was never really expecting him to be one of the starting defenders at the Euros. Were you?
No. I mean, he wasn't at the World Cup as well, was he? And he was already looked a superstar then. I mean, it's the sort of very curious way of international managers. I don't understand it at all with Upamecano. I watch more than just the Champions League games of Bayern, and a lot of the sort of self-inflicted wounds they had kind of came from him. He's a talented defender, but yeah, don't get it. But my suspicion is that for all Deschamps' done, it always sounds like his reign is sort of going more towards the end than the beginning. And I think, look, it's like club managers as well, isn't it? When you play good games for them, they trust you, even if we sort of on the sidelines are sort of saying, oh, what about this other guy on the fringes of the squad who plays well when he comes in? I can't see Saliba stepping out. More likely is that in due time he will just be France's starting centre back.
Yeah, I wouldn't be at all surprised once Deschamps goes, which could well be after this tournament.
Well, when they lose to England in the semis, the humiliation of it will force him out, won't it?
There you go. And then whoever comes in afterwards, I'm pretty sure Saliba will be a fixture in that centre back. To be honest, I don't really care either. I'd rather him not play this summer. I'd rather him spend the entire tournament sitting on the bench, to be honest, doing nothing but not play, and then being nicely, perfectly ready to come back to Arsenal without a whole tournament's worth of play in his legs throughout the summer. Finally, from Isaac says, "Hi, Charles. I've been watching your shows for years, but first time asking a question. Fantastic show. Thank you, Isaac. I was wondering, when looking at the second leg of the game against Bayern, it almost looked like we were missing that X factor, that player that could push us over the line. And looking at the players we are linked with, if you were to choose a player that could possibly help give us a different dimension in those tight games, who would you choose? I think we have a great squad, but I think we have an over-reliance on players such as Odegaard could expose us in really tight games. Interesting. I think Arsenal certainly share this thought about wanting a bit of an X-factor player. And this is kind of why in my buy section, going back to that question, I put Michael Olise in there. Because I think out of everyone, he is the sort of player who could, in a tight game, just do something out of nothing that could win Arsenal a game that they don't really have yet in that squad. You could just skin someone 25 yards out and then bend one into the top corner with that left foot of his. I could easily see him doing that. So, of all the players they're linked with, I think he would be the one I think could come in and be the X factor type player.
I fear he's still not quite there. And there is an argument to be made that I'm one of the biggest sort of the Premier League is the best league in the world guys, but I've never seen him do it in the Champions League. They're not really linked to either of these players, and the fees would be ginormous. And I'm not saying it might happen, but I think Leao, Kvaratskhelia, player of that level might, when we're talking about players to decide Champions League games, maybe even if you're sort of gambling a bit more on someone that might develop into that, a Xavi Simons, that's the sort of guy you need to be thinking about. But I completely agree with the question from Isaac. Like Arsenal do just a little light on game changers. And when you see all these Champions League matches, for all the talk of sort of tactics and the coach master plans over two legs, sometimes the best player on the pitch just goes, yeah, I got this. Whether it's Vinicius, whether it's Mbappe, whoever, a lot of them will be playing for Real Madrid. Rodrigo would be a great one.
He would be a great one.
I can't see that happening this summer. No. But that, I think you need to almost have a little pot set aside that's for superstars. Even if that means you sort of frustrate Arteta and you frustrate fans by not fixing the left wing. And when we say, I like the idea of Olise, but even, as you talk it through, you sort of think, well, if he waited a year and could get someone way better, is that the way to fix this problem?
I don't know, but if Olise joins Arsenal in a year's time, would he not be that guy who is way better? See what I mean? Is he ready to take that next step now where he could just go into the stratosphere after moving to a bigger club and playing with better players? He's immensely talented, Olise. I really like him. The injuries are the one thing that worry me when it comes to him. But I think I might be willing to put those to one side to sign him. I fear Olise going to another top Premier League club. I do worry about what sort of player he could turn into by going to one of the really top clubs. But we shall see on that. Look, we're getting towards the hour mark now. I think we've gone through all the questions. So it's as good as time as any to call time on this. We'll be back again at some point next week. What plans for the rest of the week, mate? You doing anything fun?
No, this is the quiet week. Although we've got some great stuff coming up on CBS. I can tease this now by the time it goes live. We'll be ranking the 100 best players in the world. It's quite. I was blown away by the number of Arsenal players and how high they were. So
says a lot. Says a lot about the squad.
There you go. Stay tuned. But I think maybe we could talk about that next week when we meet, because it'll pretty much all be out by then.
Absolutely. So this is a weekend without football for you. You're not going to a game because you've been to the cup final, then you went to Champions League final. So you've actually got your first weekend.
I got both days off as well.
Of the off season.
Hardly ever seen.
And then next weekend, that's the Euro start, isn't it? Next weekend, isn't it? So this is it. It's one game. It's one weekend now with no football, and then that's it.
Weekend. Yeah.
Wow.
Although, I'm off to a wedding the following week, so missing the start of the Euros. Well done, mate.
Excellent. Nice one. All right, mate. Cheers for joining me. And we'll catch up again next week. Yeah.
Yeah. Speak soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone for watching. Like I said, as usual, usual show back tomorrow. And anything you want me to discuss in that show, then you know what to do by now. Questions, comments, opinions, get into there, and I'll put them all together and chat through some of them tomorrow. All right, have a good one, everyone. Cheers, James. Speak to you soon, mate. Bye-bye.
Speak soon. Bye-bye.